Welcome to episode 14 of the Shaffer Creative Podcast. This is the 8th edition of Conversations with Creatives and part 3 of my conversation with animation supervisor Michael Greenholt. Mike is currently CG supervisor for a new Monsters, Inc. TV series for Disney Television. In this episode, Mike and I talk about being an artist in an age of social media, and I ask Mike what he wants to do in his career. And like anyone who's an animation supervisor, he wants to direct his own animated film. And rather than talk about it, Mike has created 3 minutes of some very beautiful and funny animation for the story that he has in mind. And the style is striking. It's a throwback to the 60s Disney-style animation. And not only does it reach back to the good old days, Mike keeps one hand firmly planted on the tools that we have today. I think you're going to find this episode fascinating. Shaffer Creative is a product of my family of 6, all of us pursuing careers in film or the arts. This is our place to showcase our art, document our growth, and share what we learn. We hope you'll find value in learning from our artistic convictions, our mistakes and successes, and the guidance we share as a family. In the Conversations with Creatives edition, I invite my friends, colleagues, and heroes to talk about their craft, their education, and professional life in their art. I'm animation director Todd Shaffer, the father and your host on this edition of the Shaffer Creative Podcast. So what kinds of things would you like to do in your career that you haven't done yet?
It's funny you mention that because I'm 43 now.
Wow, you're so old.
Yeah.
Let's look at me.
Yeah. But no, like, back when I was 39 and a half and 3/4, you're starting to get to that point of like, wait a minute. When I was 19, I was going to be a world-famous animator / director / archaeologist,
Yeah.
Where am I? And, I was thinking about, it's like, man, I wish I was making my own cartoons, because even from a kid, I had my own ideas, I had my own characters, you get into Disney and you're like, man, if I do these in-betweens right, they'll just make me a director, and that doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't.
But also the technology at the time was like, you can make a fully animated thing at home on your home computer.
Yeah.
So, the voice in my head's like, why aren't you making your own cartoons? And so, granted, one man can't make a feature, but one man can do a few seconds of animation or a minute. And so I just started making my own stuff. And part of that is learning new software, new technology. It's practicing, it's experimenting, and so, for the past 4 years or so, I've just been...
You got your own personal project going.
And it's amazing how those little experiments at home you can bring to work and be like, I did this thing at home that saved me hours worth of time because, by the time the kids go to bed and I go to bed, and spend time with my wife, I've got maybe 45 minutes to work on this.
Yeah.
And so if there's a way to do anything faster, now's the time to figure that out. But also it's like, there's a level of quality that I miss and that I yearn for. So it's like, how can I, that's the holy grail of like, how can I do something that looks amazing but only takes minutes to do?
That's cool.
And so what I've been doing 2D, but I've been using CG animation to help speed up the process.
Really?
Yeah, and so timing is hard to do in 2D, but if you're working in Maya, you have a graph editor, and you can just tweak things and fine-tune timing. So I'll just take, might be spheres or cubes, and just, this represents the head, this represents the hands, animate those in Maya, get the timing down exactly where I want it, and just make a quick time, take that into Harmony, and then draw over top of that. So then I can go into just the creative mind, knowing that my timing and mechanics are worked out. I did an animation of a horse trotting, and horses are hard to draw. They're hard
Yes,
to
they
animate. So I started with a block for the body, and then another block for the neck and head. It just got the timing, to where it had the weight that I wanted, and then I did the front legs, and I did the back legs, and then when I had something that was working, then I took that into 2D, and then I didn't just directly trace it, but I had like my extremes, so I knew where to put the keys, and then I could spend time just getting the design right, the forms right, but also it told me where the perspective was at that given moment. And so, the main keys and the breakdowns I had three-dimensional reference for and knew exactly what the angle of the leg would be at that moment. And then the in-betweens I would just do flipping line between line, and it gave this kind of cool look that it felt more solid than I would have drawn if I was just trying to work out the structure and the perspective in my head. But then I wasn't slaving trying to fine-tune a tune shader on something, and I could break it where I wanted to. I could stretch things or change things to fit a design.
Cool.
And there's a big freedom in that.
That's an interesting approach to doing it. That's really fascinating.
There was another thing that I was doing where there was a woman with a dress, and she was just walking through a window. It was just in silhouette, and I had my model sheet there, and I was drawing, and I'm like, man, it'd be nice if I could just key the model sheet along beside it, just so that it would stay as a reference.
That's cool.
But then I was like, she's picking her legs up high and she's bending over. It'd be nice if these pieces of the model sheet were separate, so that I could gauge the length of her legs. And I'm like, I just want to do puppet animation. And it worked. It was a silhouette, and so I just broke it basically into like a puppet and did that. But then I had this skirt. She was wearing a skirt, and I wanted that. So I'm like, it's a lot easier to do a cloth dynamic than it is to... So I took that into Maya, put it on an image plane, just made like a simple cloth shape, ran a simulation on it, got this really nice natural movement on it, took that back into Harmony, and every place where a cloth sim kind of crinkles or gets weird, I just smooth it out. I just drew over top of it, and still every frame was a unique drawing, but I had...
Cool. I'd love to see it.
I had reference...
Oh, he's going to pull it out.
Yeah.
No, but my son has showed me not Glenn, Milk Calls Shere Khan, the one where he walks off and it's like, and he says, did they do rotoscope on that? And I'm like, well, legend is. Milt did this all by hand.
Well, and that's the thing, I can't animate like Milk Call, but with today's technology, I can sneak up on it,
right.
And just do it, bite-sized chunks. So here's something that I've been working on. This doesn't exist online, so you have an exclusive look at this.
Oh, fantastic. This is beautiful.
This is Maya, After Effects, Harmony, and it's 2D, it's CG,
This is incredible.
It's everything. This was learning Harmony, this was learning After Effects, this was, using CG tools.
Oh my gosh, how long did this take you to do?
This took me 3 years to do.
Wow. This is fantastic. I want to see that movie.
Yeah.
You need to go show it to Netflix.
Yeah, I should. Yeah. No, and it's like I was missing 1960s animation, but it was like, what if we had that sensibility, but through today's technology at it?
That's for sure.
Because I felt like there was a time in history where people split and said there's CG animation and there's 2D, and you do all or nothing.
Yeah. No,
we're starting to come back around, like things like Paperman and Klaus. It's like the boundaries are getting blurred.
Yeah, they're getting blurred, but it's choosing the tools to their advantage.
But there's a certain look that I miss, and it's
well, you captured it.
Thank you.
That just took me back. Like, oh wow. If you ever want a job, animating, or
you heard it here.
directing,
How much does it pay? Yeah.
Oh, wow. I'm just blown away.
Thank you.
Cool. Yes, you got to take that. And if Netflix doesn't want it, we'll try to get it financed in Montreal. And we'll do it.
If only I knew a good 2D animation studio. But no, and I mean, and that has been my sanity project, because a lot of it is like, you sit and you complain about like, why doesn't someone do a good 2D project, and then again that voice comes up and it's like, well, what's stopping you from doing it?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, and I've often heard like, creative people say, make the project you want to see.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what that is. And
I don't think there's enough of that. And when you go through the process, you have this vision, but to actually articulate that vision and put it in a plastic form that's tangible is a completely different animal.
Yeah.
And I think your vision often exceeds your ability, but you have to get into it and wrestle with it in order to get to it.
Yeah, and this was something where, you work in a studio, it's compromise, and that's the name of the game, but it's like, it's easy to complain about a director or an art director, but then again that voice is like, well, can you do any better?
Exactly.
And so this was sort of my
yes, I can. Here, I'll show you.
At the time I started, it's like, I think I can.
That's brilliant.
And it's just
so you have a director in you. And a writer.
A storyteller. I mean, it's like, we grow up and we play with Legos or action figures, and we make these worlds and these scenarios, and it's like, it's in us from childhood, and I think a lot of people abandon it as they get older.
But for sure. Netflix, if you're listening, Michael Greenholt.
Tell him how great it looked.
It looks beautiful. I've not seen anything like it.
And I have a lot of the artwork for this. I have on my Instagram. Cool. I don't have the full piece on there yet for obvious reasons. I want to hold it back a little bit.
Yeah. Wow. So, what are you thinking now in terms of the new media, putting things online? Do you put that stuff out there, or do you hold back? And what are those parameters?
It's tricky because it's, I haven't met an artist who doesn't want approval. I think a lot of, we get into drawing, especially animation, because it's like, it's making cool stuff. We want people to say, hey, you made a cool thing and I like you. And so it's easy, with social media to want to put everything out there and it feels good to get positive feedback because, like I said, when I went to college, it was pre-internet. And so I remember there was a time when you would make artwork and no one would see it unless you physically showed it to them. And I did one piece in an illustration class that a teacher of mine entered into a contest, and it got into a magazine. And it was like, I'm published. More than 10 people can see this piece of art that I did. And that was amazing. And now, you can do a piece of art and millions of people, in theory, everyone on Earth can see it, if they can borrow someone's phone. But because of that, I see so many people that are just like, I'm going to put everything out there. And it's like, any unscrupulous character designer or filmmaker could be like, oh, here's a buffet of character designs, and I'm just going to pick this, and this, and
that's cool.
And because so much of it looks similar to others, it's like it's hard to track it back to like, you stole this guy's
it's derivative of so many other things.
Yeah, and or I'm going to take the head from this person's design and put it on the body of this one, and it's compromised and not as good, but they don't care. They're making their thing. So, the desire to put everything out there is strong, but I feel like you need to hold a little bit back so that, at some point, if you do want to sell it through iTunes or, something that people haven't already seen it.
Yeah.
I mean, because I know, like, you used to go to Comic-Cons and artist alleys, and it's like, I want to buy so-and-so's sketchbook, and you gladly give them your money to be inspired. But now it's like, artists will have a book, it's like, everything in here is on your webpage. at a higher resolution. Like, why, I might buy it to support you, but
yeah, it's all there,
but it's all there and more,
it's like Norman Grizz, they put out all those instructional things,
and they're amazing and
they're
beautiful.
They're really fantastic, but you can get them online.
And I hope they're holding the really good stuff back.
I hope so too.
But and also too, when I hate this word, but like your personal branding, because you we live in the time of the individual where, artists, even working in the studio still have their own personal identity. And you see lots of people that are like, I'm going to put up a drawing every day. And that's a great exercise. But I would argue, put up the good stuff.
Yes.
Put up the stuff that you're really proud of. So if someone's coming to find out who you are,
they'll figure it out.
It's more condensed, and they can be like, oh, this is what they do, as opposed to, it's fascinating to see experiments and failures, and those are good. Those are worth posting, but I think it's worth it to curate, what you put out there. And even if you do decide to put everything out there, make sure you think about that first.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with that. Because I follow a lot of people on Instagram. It's like, oh my gosh, I've seen this 100 times. It's different, but show me something different. And I follow a lot of painters, and I'm like, how many still people can I see being painted? Headshots. It's like, really? Give me something to excite me.
Yeah. No, and the things that grab me are when I have to go back and be like, wait, what is that?
Yeah.
That's amazing. What am I looking at there?
Yeah. The other thing is that the good stuff rises to the surface when you're flipping, and it's like, that stops, and you spend some time with it.
Yeah, exactly. But then there's always, you'll find an artist that it's like, where did he or she come from? And you look and it's like, oh, they've been doing this for 20 years.
Yeah,
and I haven't heard of it.
Yeah. So what are you going to do with this? What is your plan? Are you writing a script? Are you boarding it?
I'm starting. It was weird because working in LA, everyone you meet has a screenplay they're working on. And so I wanted to actually make something before I was selling it, because I often see the opposite. So I did this test to explore the character. One, just to see if like the look I was going for could be achieved, and I think so. Like the final product I'm really happy with. I would love to do projects that look like that. So I would love to do it as a movie or a TV series. I'm starting to think about scripts for those. I'm working on a picture book, because again, that feels like something that one man can do by himself. And so I'm doing not the definitive story of the character, but a story of the character. And so I want to do that. I'd love to do like little animated vignettes that are like 5 to 10 seconds, again, just to explore the character. And part of it too is just to kind of put my stake in the ground of like, here's the character, this is what it does, before I have to compromise anything.
Right. Yeah, I see. So you're establishing it from the finished world where it's all there, and then that's what's going to sell.
Yeah. And I'm still exploring. Like, I just showed you that 2D test. I've built the character in 3D and I've started rigging it just to have it. And again, to do some things are faster to animate in CG, that I could do that and use it as reference for 2D, or hybrids. It's like, do I do the body and dress in CG and the face and hair in 2D? Because it's like whatever serves the medium and the story best, like, do that.
Well, I wish you the best in that, man. I hope
Thank you.
Hope somebody finds
Thank
that.
you. Yeah. Again, I haven't tried to sell it yet.
But
but if you're listening, you have a lot of money.
That's fantastic.
And no creative ideas of your own. But no, step one was like, just make something, because it's easy to talk about, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and I just wanted to
That's cool, man.
make it. And so like what I showed you is basically a 1-minute origin story of the character.
That's great. Well, this is great, Mike.
Yes,
I
thank you so
appreciate
much.
the time you gave me and pulling away from Disney
No.
We won't tell them what time you left.
No. I left at 8 p.m. Like I do every day. Having put in a full day but not exceeding my union allocated hours.
Oh, that's brilliant, Mike. Well, thanks again.
No problem.
Next time you're in Montreal, look us up.
I will.
Next week, we turn to the world of classical painting as my guest is one of the few living students of a painter you probably have never heard of, Henry Henshey. Henry Henshey was a student of Charles Hawthorne, and Hawthorne himself was a student of William Merritt Chase. I'm sure you've heard of one of those guys. John overflows with fascinating detail about the history of American art through the lineage of these men. And I think you'll have a new appreciation for the history of American art after this episode. And looking ahead, as promised, legendary Disney animator Michael Surrey will be up in 2 weeks. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Shaffer Creative Podcast. You'll find the show notes and more information about Shaffer Creative at shaffercreative.studio. Music is by Lee Rosevere.